Let's say you're shopping for a new EV, but the ravings of a certain megalomaniac have gotten to be just a bit too much for you. The good news is the list of capable alternatives is growing, and one such entry happens to be the Audi Q4 E-Tron, which was updated this year to provide more range and faster charging speeds, important elements for any EV, let alone one looking to take on the Tesla Model Y. But let's say a competent crossover just isn't enough to satisfy your electrified needs. The good news is Audi's got just a little something extra for you, and I happen to have it with me today. No, this thing isn't entirely electrified like an EV, but it is built to give you the boost you need to keep riding all day long, and that's exactly what I plan to do. Now, Will, let's hit him with that sweet, sweet montage. For more expert car reviews, don't forget to share our channel and subscribe so you can catch some of this and maybe even a little of that. Okay, look, I want to get to the bike stuff as much as at least some of you out there, but we really should kick this off with some talk about this Q4, and it did launch a few years ago as what might seem like Audi's version of the Volkswagen ID.4, and while that's kind of true, there is a lot more to the story, but there are two versions you can pick from. There's a rear-wheel drive as well as an all-wheel drive version. That's the one I am driving. There's also a Sportback version that you can only get with all-wheel drive. All three of them, they use the same 82 kilowatt-hour battery pack, but there are some chemistry changes with this sort of mid-year refresh that Audi kind of quietly introduced. So there is more range than before. This one I'm driving now has an estimated range of 415 kilometers instead of 380. And then if you go with the rear-wheel drive version, that's supposed to be good for 463 kilometers. Yes, that is still short of what you can do in a Tesla Model Y, but that's not the point. The point is that this thing is more competitive than before. Something else to note about those chemistry changes, it means this battery can be charged faster than before, so it can top out at 175 kilowatts instead of 150. Yes, that is in ideal conditions, but I will say this morning I hooked up to a DC fast charger, a 200 kilowatt station, and I was able to go from 35 to 99% in 42 minutes. Now this thing is supposed to do the jump from 10 to 80% in just under 30 minutes instead of a little bit more than 30 minutes, which was the case before. But when you break down the numbers, I did pretty well this morning, because don't forget that last 20% of the battery, that is the hardest to charge. And the reason for that is pretty simple. It's that EV batteries don't charge through their cells sort of sequentially. They just fill the ones that are kind of available, the easiest ones, and then the last 20%, those are the hardest ones because they're the individual cells scattered around the battery pack. I've used the analogy before that it's sort of like filling up an ice cube tray. You can get all the pockets, but if you want them all full to an even level, it's going to take some time for all that water to shift around, and that's kind of what you're seeing here. But considering I did that charge in 42 minutes this morning, I would be pretty happy. And of course, if you plug into a level 2 charger, you can do the job overnight. Now I know those might seem like incremental changes, but they do add some comfort to the ownership experience and just make the Q4 easier to live with overall. Something that's still missing here though, no full one pedal drive mode. Yes, you can drop this gear selector into this B setting, and that does add some recuperation, but it can't bring this thing to a full stop. Right around, I don't know, 11 or 12 kilometers an hour, you have to take over with the mechanical brakes. I really wish this thing had proper one pedal driving like most of its competitors. More modern ones are introducing that just about across the industry. So to see that missing here, little bit of a disappointment. And speaking of that gear selector, I keep finding myself reaching for just about anything else, which tells me it is not entirely intuitive. It's this little slider down here on the center console, and I don't like it at all. I just recently drove the Chevy Blazer EV, and I keep reaching for this stalk on the steering column, which is where the one in the Blazer EV is. But that tells me that this is not a good setup. It really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Honestly, I would much rather see push buttons or even a dial than this little slider here. I also don't love the fact that this thing shuts on and off when you get in and out of the seat, just like it does in the ID4. Not a big fan of those systems. It seems entirely unnecessary, especially because there is a power button here on the console as well. So that's kind of a frustration, but those are pretty minor annoyances overall. The user experience, pretty straightforward. So I do really like that there's a full complement of physical climate controls, and there's a dedicated LCD screen so you can see the temperature as well as what setting that you have it in. There's also a pretty straightforward infotainment system, bit of a learning curve, but only insofar as it is so simple to use that it doesn't make sense because it's sort of non-traditionally simple, but there is wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, so it is very easy to hook your phone up. If you use the built-in navigation system that you can add to this thing, well, it does look a little bit outdated, but one cool thing is you can pull up a full map view in the instrument display, and if you spend a little bit more money, you can get turn-by-turn directions with an augmented reality display in the head-up display, and that is kind of cool. So it'll show you big arrows, street names, that sort of stuff right on the windshield in front of you. So even someone like my boss and your favorite AutoTrader co-host, Jody Lai, who's a little bit directionally challenged, won't have any excuses with a system like that. Now, in any premium vehicle, you're going to be able to add options and extras that can add thousands to the price tag. That is the case with the Q4, including this one I am testing. And we will get to that in just a minute, but fundamentally speaking, there is just an upscale swagger, a suppleness. You can really feel that German premium vibe that is not something you can get with the Model Y or any Tesla. I'm sorry, those shortcomings still exist. Those are not premium vehicles. This very much is. That's also where you see it go its separate way from the ID4. And I like the ID4, but this thing does feel like an entirely different vehicle. It's the quietness, the smoothness of the suspension. There's a heft to this vehicle. I know that might seem strange if you haven't driven an Audi or a BMW or Mercedes-Benz, but they feel heavy while still remaining kind of nimble and agile. And that is very much the case here. You can just feel that sense of quality, that sense of luxury, and it is on full display in this Q4. And then, like I talked about, those options and extras, yes, they add to the price tag, but they also elevate the experience. This one I'm driving, it has something like $18,000 in options, which is a lot, but there's very little that's left to be desired here. The only thing I can really think of off the top of my head, no ventilated front seats, but just about everything else, including a Sonos stereo, is here. So it does feel like a premium vehicle. It's a little bit hard to justify spending, I don't know, $83,000 before tax on a crossover this size, but it does start around 65 grand. So maybe if you split the difference, only add some of those options, you could find yourself a reasonably priced Q4 that almost has what it takes to take on that Model Y. Now, I have to say, these upgraded sport seats that are part of one of the upgrade packages, they are incredibly supportive and comfortable. And regardless, you get heated front seats, a heated steering wheel, leather upholstery, tri-zone automatic climate control. All of that stuff is standard no matter which version you opt for. It is worth pointing out, though, the rear-wheel drive version does not have a heat pump, which could be a problem in wintertime. This Q4 that I'm driving is about 87 grand before tax, and that doesn't even include the cost of the bike. But before we get to this thing, I gotta say, I don't think I've seen a simple blackout package do as much heavy lifting as the one that's offered here. Without it, you have this massive silver slab up front that's a little too in your face for my taste, but I really like this look. And speaking of looks, just check out this badass bike. Now, Audi says the styling was inspired by its RSQ E-Tron Dakar rally car, and you can really see it. This thing also has all kinds of quality components, from the group set to the suspension and the brakes. This also happens to be my first time ever riding an e-assist mountain bike, so let's go hit the trails. This part feels like cheating. All right, guys, maiden voyage on this Audi E mountain bike. The first thing I want to say, yes, this is a little small for me, but then I am a pretty big guy. I've told you before, I'm about 6'4", so finding the right sized bike isn't always easy, and that's certainly the case here, but it's not terrible. It doesn't feel too small. It's just a little short, and the chainstays are a little short next to something that I would ride, like my Forbidden Druid. So here's what I'm going to tell you. I almost feel like I'm cheating right now. I have been on these trails a million times before, and this climb that I'm doing right now is never easy. And even in sport mode, so not even boost mode, this thing just climbs almost unfairly. I feel bad for Will. He's on a very capable Da Vinci full suspension bike, but it's just a different ball game. And it's not that I dislike it. I'm not one of these haters. You know, I think you ride what you want to ride, just like you drive what you want to drive, and I'll ride what I want to ride and drive what I want to drive. This, for me, it's just a little bit of an unfair advantage because, as Will said, are you doing this for fun or for exercise? And if you're doing it for both, well, then it doesn't really feel like you're getting the same exercise as you would on a conventional mountain bike. The fun is definitely there, and it's also hilarious to climb like this without any issue whatsoever. But then again, no pain, no gain, right? As cheesy as that is, there is some truth to it. That's kind of the joy of cycling. Doesn't matter what discipline. You work hard, you work for it, and it's just that much more enjoyable. As much fun as I'm having out here on this thing, it does feel like I'm not really getting everything that I normally would out of it. But it is fun. Going over these obstacles and going downhill as well is an absolute blast. This thing weighs almost 60 pounds. It is a lot of bike. So you don't have to have the e-assist on to get all kinds of momentum. And on that note, I do want to point out that this is an e-assist bike. This is not a full electric bike. So there's no throttle like you would get on a motorcycle. You still have to pedal, and then it'll help you out as you go. So right now I'm coming up this kind of gradual incline with the e-assist off. And it rides just like any other bike. But then again, having this, the whole point of it is to use the e-assist. Otherwise, you may as well just be riding a conventional bike, and here I am coming up a bit of a rocky climb, and it's just hilariously easy. And that's just in eco mode. There's tour, sport, and then boost mode, where this thing really rips. I mean, here I go. I'm having a look down here, and in no time, I have hit 30 kilometers an hour, and I am flying through this single track. So it is putting a smile on my face. I'll give the bike that much. Now, coming up over these whoops. And I'm gonna go ahead and lower the e-assist. All right, and I'm coming back down the hill. So this part feels just like any other bike. To recap, I like the Audi Q4's solid upscale driving feel, the incremental improvements made this year, and that it makes for a viable alternative to the Tesla Model Y for those who need it. I don't like how expensive it gets with options, that there's still no proper one-pedal drive mode, or that it still doesn't quite have as much range as the Model Y. With or without the bike, this test has been enlightening as far as everything that Audi can deliver in an electrified package. You know, the Q4, it's not the brand's newest EV, but there's still a lot to like about it, especially that upscale swagger that Audi has been known for years. And when it comes to the bike, well, I can definitely see the appeal of these e-assist setups. That doesn't mean I'm ready to give up my regular mountain bikes, but I definitely dig the idea of being able to ride for longer.